Iran wishes to foment maybe an uprising, another intifada in the West Bank, if it wishes to use its proxies in Hezbollah to try and, bombard the northern Israeli territories with the very, very capable rocket stores they have, then this could really, really spark off. The Americans have two carrier groups in the Eastern Mediterranean. What we would really hope is we do not start a major shooting war with American combat troops or combat aircraft involved against Iran, say, or striking in Lebanon. I mean, there's any number at which you'll have seen over the years which ways this could spin out of control. And so it's for everybody, one would argue, to try and find some way to minimize blow, counter blow, riposte, counter riposte.
Top story of the day. The US President Joe Biden has been in Israel a day after the blast at the Al Ali hospital in Gaza. He blamed what he called the other side for the attack, but called for aid to be given to civilians in Gaza.
Today I asked the Israeli cabinet, who I met with for some time this morning, to agree to the delivery of life-saving humanitarian assistance to civilians in Gaza, based on the understanding that there will be inspections and that the aid should go to civilians, not to Hamas. Israel agreed the humanitarian assistance can begin to move from Egypt to Gaza.
Well, that was Joe Biden speaking in Israel earlier. I'm joined now by Lieutenant General Sir Simon Mayall, former British Army officer and Middle East advisor to the Ministry of Defence. Thanks for being with us, Simon. Appreciate you joining us.
Good evening, Kate.
Hello. I wonder what you made of Joe Biden's visit today. He did double down, of course. He issued a statement via the White House confirming that the US does not believe that Israel carried out the missile strike on the Al Ali hospital yesterday. He was very clear about that. But I wonder what you made of the visit overall.
I'm glad he made it. I think, unfortunately, it was overshadowed by the tragedy at the hospital because it was due to include meetings with Mohammed Abbas and the Jordanian King Abdullah II. And I think that would have been very helpful. The tragedy at the hospital, of course, made it very difficult for those Arab leaders, Muslim leaders, to meet Joe Biden. I think he will absolutely have called for as much restraint as he believes Israel is able to show, given the scale of the atrocities on the 7th of October. And he will have, I suppose, hoped to have gone back and made some impact of trying to, caution against widening the conflict.
Cautioning against widening the conflict is, of course, a very good message to put out. But I think many Arab leaders would say that actually Joe Biden is doing the opposite in doubling down, unsurprisingly, it has to be said, of his support of Israel. I mean, did he have any choice in that? Could he have been a little gentler? Is there a genuine issue here, really, with Arab leaders signalling their discontent?
I mean, I think one's just got to keep remembering what happened on the morning of the 7th of October. 1,300 people, the vast majority of them not remotely by any stretch of the imagination, military targets, were massacred, some of them in the most atrocious manner. Israel has a right to defend itself. America has always been very, very strongly supportive. As you know, it's a big, major issue in domestic American politics. At the heart of this is human tragedies. We've had that. We've then had 1,000, you name it, Gazan casualties as a result of Israeli response. And then we've had this shocking incident at the hospital, which, to all intents and purposes, knowing that Israel really couldn't go barefaced lying to the world, and the Americans have their own intelligence networks, is the result of a miscalculation by jihadi parties within Gaza. So the whole thing's a huge tragedy, but very, very difficult, given that Hamas are a proscribed terrorist organization as far as America is concerned. And America's support for the state of Israel has been very, very unconditional for a very long time. So I don't think Joe Biden really, other than trying to sound as conciliatory as possible across all parties, because the Americans have huge stake across the Middle East as well, could have done much more or much less than he did.
There are calls from some people that Joe Biden, America has to do more to try and stop the crimes against Palestinians as well, to do more to protect innocent Palestinian civilians. I'm seeing reports here of many Palestinians and other Arabs saying in interviews that the rhetoric coming from senior Israeli and American officials has been dehumanizing and warmongering. I mean, that is how they feel. Do we need to urge a word of caution here? I mean, what is the wider danger across the Middle East here?
There's caution on both sides. And again, I would expect Hamas and its supporters, spurred on by Iran, Hezbollah, other jihadi groups, other whatever groups across the Middle East, to use this sort of rhetoric. It's a bit of a shock to them that this, what appears to be a Palestine Islamic Jihad missile has exploded and caused these casualties. So in some ways, they are in danger of losing what they were trying to gain as a moral high ground, and they've been assisted. We absolutely do not want a wider conflagration in the Middle East. There are enough issues there. My goodness, I've served often enough in that part of the world. How sad that Jake Sullivan the other day said, the Middle East has been more at peace than it has been for several decades, just on the eve of this the 7th of October events. But there are so many good people out there, so many people of goodwill, so many youngsters, so many people who've got so many aspirations, that we have got to collectively hope that we can contain this crisis. But it is very difficult because emotions are running very high. Blood has been spilled. There's an awful lot of complexity and historical antagonism, as you well know, Kate, that's been bubbling up and makes it very, very difficult for moderates on any side to advocate moderation and restraint and caution. What
is the worst case scenario?
Well, a lot depends on what if Iran, and I will point the finger at Iran here, and it's very interesting that the biggest supporter of Sunni Arabs in Palestine is actually the Persian Shias of Iran at the moment. It's quite interesting how the trajectory has been for many parts of the Sunni Arab world. Look at Jordan, look at Egypt, look at UAE, look at Bahrain, Morocco, and possibly Saudi Arabia had moved towards an accommodation with the Israelis. So in many ways, we can see the hand of Iran behind this. Now, if Iran wishes to foment maybe an uprising, another intifada in the West Bank, if it wishes to use its proxies in Hezbollah to try and, bombard the northern Israeli territories with the very, very capable rocket stores they have, then this could really, really spark off. The Americans have 2 carrier groups in the Eastern Mediterranean. What we would really hope is we do not start a major shooting war with American combat troops or combat aircraft involved against Iran, say, or striking in Lebanon. I mean, there's any number at which you'll have seen over the years which ways this could spin out of control. And so it's for everybody, one would argue, to try and find some way to minimize, blow, counter blow, riposte, counter riposte.
Yeah, Tehran warning yesterday of preemptive action against Israel. None of this plays out particularly flatteringly when you broadened it out a bit. I mean, from your military experience, what is your view on how this conflict can be managed? I mean, I want to say brought to an end, but that's a very simplistic question to ask. How would you be advising? How would you foresee this conflict being managed at the moment?
Yeah, it is very difficult. The Israelis feel justifiably, for a small country, 1,300 people killed on a single day is a major, major atrocity and blow. I think the Americans, funnily enough, one thing they would say is watch out for the heat of the moment response. We know what happened after 9/11. We know the sort of rhetoric that was used by George W. Bush. We know the sort of actions that the US embarked upon and allies with them. Some of them, again, you can see were understandable, justifiable, but led to all sorts of consequences in the Middle East, of which this is probably another ripple. So there will be a warning, I think, to the Israelis to think very, very carefully while acknowledging their sort of pain, anguish and desire to lash out, to try and be as measured as possible, because you have got these concentric rings around Israel and within Israel, the Palestinian Israel. There's the Israel-Hamas issue, the Israel-Palestine issue, the Israel-Arab issue, the Israel-Muslim issue. It's a very
Hezbollah
big
thrown into
world.
that as well. Yeah, certainly.
Interestingly, I would say, Kate, I don't know what's going on behind the scenes with China. China does have leverage in Tehran. China needs unfettered access to oil and gas that still comes out of the Middle East and has absolutely no. I think it's probably, finding this chaos and the problems it's setting America quite useful, but they have no vested interest in a wider conflict that stops oil and gas flowing to the Far East. So it may well be that there's voices of caution coming from Beijing to the regime in Tehran.
Well, look, it's really interesting to speak to you. Thank you so much for your experience across that. Lieutenant General Sir Simon Mayall, former British Army officer and a Middle East advisor to the Ministry of Defence. Incredible amount of experience in that area. Simon, good to speak to you. Thank you.